All right, hello and welcome to another exciting session as part of our BI and Reporting webinar series. I'm Adam Berezin from msdynamicsworld.com. In today's session, Analytics and Power BI Integration in Microsoft Dynamics AX will be presented by Melinda Vitarana, Principal Program Manager, Dynamics AX R&D at Microsoft, and Clay Wessener, Solutions Architect, Dynamics AX R&D at Microsoft. So before we get started, I want to thank our two webcast sponsors, Jet Reports and De Facto, for their continued support of msdynamicsworld.com. I'd also like to mention that we invite you to add your feedback and ask questions today during the presentation. Please use the Q&A tab on the right-hand side of your screen to submit your questions, and Melinda and Clay will be sure to answer all of them at the end of the presentation. So without further delay, please allow me to welcome our first presenter, Melinda Vitarana.
Good morning, good evening. Thank you for joining again. As you know, Microsoft Dynamics AX, or AX7 as we like to call it, we've been working on this for a long time, and I'm super excited to actually join with Clay and share what's new in Dynamics AX7, some of the great stuff that we've done in the analytics space, and of course how we are integrating with Power BI in a very, very deep manner. So here's how we're gonna approach this topic. As I mentioned earlier, Dynamics AX, we've been working on this product for about 2 years at this point, and we've done some really exciting stuff. But what you'll notice is that it's actually an evolution from the journey that we started almost 10, 12 years ago by adding BI into Dynamics, by making BI a first-class citizen of Dynamics AX. So let's just spend a minute and how we've evolved. And of course, let's take a quick look at how analytics lights up in the Dynamics AX client, the new user experience. Now, all these experiences that we've built are fairly easy to actually create. And if you're a developer, if you're an AX developer, we'll quickly see how these experiences are being built and how easy it is to actually create these experiences on behalf of your users. And of course, a lot of these things are enabled by the fact that a lot of the magic, I would say, is enabled by capabilities that is provided to us by Microsoft Azure. So let's spend a minute and try to understand some of the underpinnings and how we benefit from that. And of course, let's get to Power BI integration, how we are treating Power BI as a first-class citizen inside the AX system. So with that, let's get started. And again, we have a lot to talk, and I think this is going to be a fairly, this is the first time we've spoken about Dynamics AX7 in public. So I'm sure we will have a lot more opportunities in the future to connect. So if you remember way back when, of course, first there were the dinosaurs and then the Model T, and we went to the moon and all that great stuff. You'll probably remember that back in AX4, we introduced this concept of perspectives. And then, the idea was very simple, to provide a view of the ERP schema so that it's easier to generate reports. It's easier to analyze the data inside an ERP. And the technology at the time was called SIMDL models, and then the tool of choice at the time was SQL Server Report Builder. So we used perspectives to really light up SQL Server Report Builder. In AX 2009, around the time that I joined this team, what we actually did was we introduced a new server called the SQL Server Analysis Services Server, SSAS server. Fundamentally, what we did then, perspectives to SSAS projects or cube projects, which you could deploy to an SSAS server, and then you could use Excel to analyze the data. Now, 2012, we of course made a lot of improvements into the perspectives modeling, But what we did was we've also introduced this Power View and Power BI capabilities. To understand, what we've done is to present a simpler schema of the ERP to the users, and that's what perspectives do. And in fact, what you will find in New Dynamics AX or AX7 is that under the covers, perspectives will leverage the in-memory real-time analytics engine that's built into the SQL Server itself. And also, perspectives become first-class citizens of the AX data access stack, and they become the focal point of lighting up Power BI. So we've made a lot of investments behind perspectives. Now, you may not hear the word perspectives that much. You may not hear the word cubes that much. Instead, you'll hear this word called aggregate measurements. Fundamentally, think of it as an evolution of perspectives. Now it's becoming first-class citizen, and let's see in a demo what that really means. This concept that I'd like to talk about is this notion of workspaces. Now, you probably remember role centers. Role centers were introduced in AX 2009. In AX 2012, we built more and more role centers. In fact, there's 45 of them. Role centers obviously are a very extensible framework built on SharePoint Server. Now, one of the things that we realized talking to you was that role centers were really meant to be two things. It was meant to be a home page. So when you entered the ERP experience, there was a home page that pretty much showed you what was important for you, depending on the role that you played. What we've also done is to provide some pre-built content that is relevant for business users. So role centers was really a combination of two things. Now, a lot of the times what we found was that, sometimes the same user prefers performing multiple roles. And sometimes what was important for a single user was not reflected in that role center, meant for that role. So, there was this decision in terms of which role do you pick. In AX7, what you will find is that we've actually split these concepts into two. There is a personalizable dashboard, which will be the focal point of the new client. But also, there are what are called workspaces, which are really centered around the processes or centered around the activities that you do. So what we've done is we've taken the concept of role centers and really expanded that into the dashboard and the workspaces. When we talk about reporting, you're probably familiar with the version of this slide as applicable to AX 2012, and you will find that our choices are similar. So, for an example, we have that is built into the client, which is much more oriented towards building experience right inside the client. And of course, for business documents, we still use SSRS reporting engine. And for financial statements, we use Management Reporter. And for data exploration, we actually leverage Power BI. So the choice of reporting options is available, but obviously we've done a lot more work to make it much more integrated. Further ado, let's take a quick look at a client, Dynamics AX client, and see how these BI options come together. So let me share my screen here. Hope you can see my screen. So let's take a look at when I log into Dynamics AX, this is the first experience, the first screen that will greet me. In fact, this is a dashboard, and I'm logged in as an administrator. And as an administrator, I pretty all the areas that I've been allowed to see. And because I'm the administrator, obviously I can see all these functional areas. But if I'm a user that has certain permissions and I've done certain things in the past, this experience will change depending on the user that I'm depending on who I am. Now this is a full HTML5 based client, so the same experience that you see on the browser. You'll pretty much be able to see the same experience on an iPad, on an Android device, and so on and so forth. Now, what I can do is I can straight away I can search for the functionality I need, or I can, pick from any of these subject areas that I need to jump into. And these subject areas are called workspaces. So, I have a list of these workspaces. And let me quickly jump into the workspace that shows me ledger budgets and forecasts. So the idea here is that if I need to monitor my budgets and if I need to monitor my forecasts, I have the ability to jump into this workspace, which at a quick glance shows me all the activities that are lined up for me. These tiles are completely drillable. I can go down into the details, and I can take a look at the budgets that are in flight. Also, these are lists that I can take a quick look. So, for an example, if I look at all the forecasts in progress, I have the ability to quickly jump through these different lists. Now, browse to the right, I have the ability to visualize I have the ability to pin some of the charts that are relevant to me. For me, in case I have the ability to pin Power BI charts, Power BI tiles right into my client. And of course, what I can do is I can click one of these tiles and jump right into Power BI for further analysis or for exploring the data around that. And now, the idea here, and we'll talk more about it in the Power BI integration section, I have the ability to launch Power BI directly from my AX client and have the ability to pin whatever is relevant for me from Power BI right into AX client. So, we've made it really easy to navigate from back and forth from AX client into Power BI and back into AX. So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's look at another workspace, which is oriented towards perhaps a slightly different persona. Now, in this case, this persona is perhaps a manager who's handling reservations in perhaps a car rental company. And those of you who are familiar with the fleet management sample will recognize that this is actually the fleet management sample in AX7. And what you'll find here is of course, again, the ability to pin Power BI, but these are some of the charts that we've built in. So these are charts that actually modeled inside AX, and you will also notice the ability to create KPIs, model KPIs, and pin them right into the experience. So this is the new KPI experience in AX Client, and the ability to run reports or to pin reports and to have ability to have reports, pin them right into the client experience. So a real quick overview of what the client looks like, and let me jump to WebEx here. Overview of what the new client experience looks like, and as you can imagine, BI plays a critical part in the new client. You have the ability to pin Power BI, native chart controls, SSRS reports, various visuals right into the client, the developer. So how would a developer consume aggregate data in AX7? Now, you've seen some of the great experiences. How did a developer build this? Now, what you will notice is this concept of perspectives or the aggregate measurements. And what we've really done is we've evolved perspectives into a real star schema. So as an AX developer, you have the ability to model a real star schema inside AX, and we would call it an aggregate measurement. And what happens is once you create this aggregate measurement, build entities using that aggregate measurement, you can consume them in forms, you can consume them in X++, and basically the data that you either, with code, you can reshape that data, or you can straight away bind that data into client controls. So fundamentally what we've done is once you modeled an aggregate measurement or a perspective, we made it a first-class citizen in the data access stack of AX. So it behaves like AX data. And then, you have the ability to render that in an AX client, either as a chart or as a grid, it doesn't matter. You also have the ability to expose these aggregate data entities via OData into Power BI so that you have the ability to author Power BI content using the same perspectives or the aggregate measurements. So from a developer point of view, what we've really done is to make aggregate data a first-class citizen of AX data and get that richness, provide that richness to AX developers so that they're much more productive. So let's take a real quick look on how a developer would model and consume aggregate data. And for this, again, let me jump into my environment. Is the developer environment for Dynamics AX7. And as you may have heard, it's completely built on Visual Studio. And inside Visual Studio 2015, you will find this add-in for Dynamics AX. And you will actually find most of the familiar environments. So for an example, here's the Application Explorer. This is what used to be the AOT. And again, let me actually switch it to the classic view. Just like in the AOT, you will find all these, all the different areas. For an example, the data model that has table definitions and so on. What you will find is this new analytics node. So this is a first-class node in the Application Explorer now. And when you expand it, you will see the perspectives. Also see KPIs. Now the perspectives are broken down into aggregate measurements, aggregate dimensions. So in terms of modeling, it's a little different than how you've been used to. And inside these aggregate measurements, you will actually find a whole bunch of aggregate measurements. In fact, you will find the cubes that we had from AX2012 that we've upgraded just to prove that we can upgrade the cube metadata that we had. And what you will find is that now these aggregate measurements are more closer to a star schema. So let's just open up one of these and take a closer look. So model that I just created before our session. And when you expand that, you will find that it has a node for attributes, it has a node for measures, and then you'll have all these properties that you can model in a measure, and then you also have dimension references that you now can model. So the idea is that you have the ability to create a star schema in the Application Explorer, leveraging the metadata concepts that are already there in AX. Now, once you create a star schema, you can create aggregate data entities, or you can create KPIs right here inside AX. And those aggregate data entities, just like other data entities, and they can be consumed. You can straight away bind that into a chart control or a form, or you can expose that as an OData endpoint so that the outside world, for an example, Power BI, can consume them. Fundamentally, what we've done is, as a developer, we've actually made it easier for you to model these concepts without focusing too much on the underlying implementation. Now, that you will notice is if you look at properties of perspectives or an aggregate measurement, you will find that there's a usage property that has been introduced. Now, by default, the usage is in-memory real-time, meaning that this measurement uses the in-memory technology built into the SQL Server to access data. So there's no the data that you read, the data that you consume, this aggregate data is in fact at best a few seconds late than operations that are happening in the OLTP database. The option to use SSAS Cube, and we'll see this in a little while. This will not be enabled in R1. This will be enabled later. But the idea of SSAS Cube is so that you can upgrade your AX2012 analysis projects that you had. So let's take a quick look at what options we have for aggregate measurement. Again, a quick recap. Aggregate measurements, they're basically star schemas. You can model them in AX by consuming tables views or the new data entities. We've done a whole lot of work to make that modeling easy. And now, notice is that we've done because of some of the technology improvements that are coming in the SQL Server and Microsoft Azure, we made it really easy to deploy content into Azure, bridging some of the new technologies. So for an example, some of the things that made abilities hard to implement in AX2012, if you take a look at it, really, there were lots of servers that you had to configure. And then, we've eliminated that by taking a dependency on the new in-memory technology that comes with SQL Server. So fundamentally, there is one database that serves both analytical needs as well as operational needs, and we do that with a technology called non-search column store indexes, or NCCI technology. Now, the other that you probably are familiar with is the cube schemas are fairly generalized in AX2012, and there was a reason for that. It was actually fairly onerous to build a cube in AX2012 compared to AX7. So one of the things that we wanted to do was to provide you a lot of value across industries, across customers. So thereby we made the cubes a lot richer than they needed to be for every customer. But the modeling is a whole lot easier. And in fact, a lot of the infrastructure things have been taken away. We've now, focused on building much more smaller scenario-focused cubes, because the idea is for you to go and modify that and build a new one is actually fairly easy. Of course, as we discussed, one of the other improvements that we've done is now aggregate data are first-class citizens. So it has the richness of AX metadata. For an example, aggregate data recognizes things like extended data types. It recognizes AX security. So there's a lot of richness that comes in. Now, the idea behind that is to enable AX developers, not BI developers, to actually build great experiences. And of course, in cubes, we're typically refreshed overnight, so there was a latency associated with that data. With real-time BI, that latency goes away. So fundamentally, you can now build very compelling operational BI scenarios with the new capabilities. Talked about the choices of aggregate models. Near real-time models are going to be the default in the R1 timeframe, which is happening the early next year. As you probably know, AX7 or Dynamics AX is initially geared towards new customers. It's not really geared towards upgrading existing customers. So fundamentally, that's why we made near real-time the default. And but during the update timeframe, which is coming subsequently, we will enable the cube-like models where you have the ability to stage data in SQL Server Analysis Services. So think of this as a scenario that you would adopt if you were to upgrade your existing analysis projects into AX7 environments. Whereas if you wanted to leverage the new stack and build new models, leveraging some of the in-memory technologies, you can start doing that right away. Slightly sort of deeper look at how aggregate models work at runtime. I'll just quickly mention it. So with the near real-time aggregate models, the aggregate data entities and KPIs and things like that that you model as a developer, behind the scenes, the data access stack generates the required SQL, and it sends to the data access stack. Whereas what happens in the stage data pattern is the data access stack will actually generate MDX and, if you so choose to stage it in SSAS. So a slightly deeper topic. Again, you can go through this online. So with that super quick overview, I'd like to hand you over to Clay to talk about Power BI integration.
Melinda, thank you very much for everyone for joining. It's great to sort of have access to so many people in one go to chat. I'm already seeing a few questions come through as well, which is great. And I apologize if I drop off. I've been having a few connectivity issues today, so I'll give you a little bit of warning in advance. So AX7 and Power BI, and I also apologize. I'm going to continue to refer to it as AX7 and not Dynamics AX. Basically, what we're doing with AX7, we've got a few core priorities in really where the areas that we want to improve. The first is simplifying the data extraction and transformation. So in 2012, we have ways of working with Power BI, but we really wanted to make that extraction process more performant, simpler, and a nicer user experience. This is then improving the integration with AX7 and really want to do this in two ways. So, again, in 2012, it's very much about an extraction process. And what you'll see we're doing now with AX7 is we're also pinning Power BI content back into the application. So we're trying to make that two-way integration. And then a little bit, I'm going to talk about our roadmap and what we've got planned coming up. And you'll see that we're planning to tighten that integration as we move forward. There is around releasing content, not just tools. So right now, our Power BI functionality that we release is very much a set of tools to support self-service scenarios. What you're going to see in the coming months as we lead up to GA is we'll be publishing what we call content packs on PowerBI.com. So you'll actually have pre-built financial performance dashboards and reports available for AX7 on Power BI that can be deployed within like 3 clicks. And there's not a technical knowledge required to go through and build that in the background. So we're really trying to make it a little more balanced, improve that end user experience, and like I said, build some content for it as well. these are the areas that we're focusing on at the moment. Sorry, this slide has some animation in it. It's all come up in one go. So I'll try and explain the areas that I'm talking through. So in the top left-hand corner, we talk about how we access data and pull it through. So Melinda's just explained, the new aggregate data entities and new aggregate measurements. So this is our method of bringing data out of AX7 into Power BI. We've changed there. Obviously now we've got access to aggregate data and it's far more performant, but it's also a nice way for users to get information out within Excel and PowerBI.com. The second part we're doing there is we're also pre-building entities that are specifically designed for Power BI scenarios. So one of the advantages of our team going through and building content packs is we've found there are some things that were a little bit hard to get through or a little bit tricky. So we've been building entities that publish out the AX financial calendars, for example, and company information and all those types of things that are needed to support a nice, easy reporting experience. So now it's not only use those entities, but they're also shipped as part of the core product. So now when partners and customers go to build their own Power BI content, they're going to have access to those entities to use as well. Right-hand corner, how we actually work with the data. This is still very similar to how it is today, and that's using Power Query, Power Pivot, and Power View. So basically the desktop suite tools within the Power BI stack. I think the main difference here is that now we've also got the ability to work with the Power BI desktop applications and in PowerBI.com. So if you're an organization that typically doesn't use Excel, you've now got options to still work with Power BI, as it doesn't have to be built within Excel anymore. It can be built within the Power BI desktop apps, which are free. Then how we want to go and collaborate. So down in the bottom right-hand corner, leveraging all the benefits of PowerBI.com, so we can share reports and dashboards. We can use natural language queries through Q&A, so where you can actually type out a question and it will build a response. And then we can start using the desktop apps, the mobile apps, much experience in getting accessibility to that information. Last part down in the bottom left-hand corner is then really how we bring it back into AX and work with it to make it a nicer experience. So pinning visualizations back into our workspaces and forms, which was what Melinda showed you a little bit earlier. Launch Power BI reports directly from AX7 workspaces now. So by clicking one of those visualizations, you can drill straight into the Power BI report. And then also, this is what we're working on at the moment, is drilling then from Power BI reports back into Dynamics AX. So as a user, you can sort of go through that whole path of, start your work in your AX7 workspace, drill into a report into Power BI, and then drill back into those detailed transactions in the background. So there's a few key areas this is when I say what's changed, is comparing to AX2012 and how that experience worked. In the AX side of things, the biggest change is obviously this move to data entities, aggregate data entities. So the big impact that it has on the Power BI world for us is what we used to do is we used queries and we published that out through OData, but they came out with very technical field names. There was no aggregation in them whatsoever, so they were just big lists of transactions. It made it very hard to work with. It wasn't very performant, and it meant you had to do a lot of work in cleaning up the data. So data entities now use they use sort of business-focused column names and entity names, so it's a lot easier for someone to work with it. And then aggregate data entities mean that we can start working with large data sets. So now we have the option to work with financial information because we can do aggregations across the general ledger rather than having to bring out all the transactions. And the last bit there to sort of make it even easier is what I was talking about before, where we've built now and we're continuing to build purpose-built entities that are specific for PowerBI.com scenarios. The part there is then around OData we've moved on to the new OData technology. So now it's a lot more performant than it was in prior versions. So doing refreshes and working with larger data sets don't have as much of an impact as they used to. The really cool bit there now is that we also have support for filtering. So we leverage the OData syntax. So if you want to work with filtered or smaller data set, in 2012, you would have to either pull out the whole data, build a custom query for it. In 7, we can actually do that through Power Query. So as you filter something in Power Query, it will actually pass that back through OData into AX7, and we'll actually run a smaller query within AX7. So it's just a far more performant option for us in general. The authoring process, the sort of two big areas there is our transformation effort has reduced, and that's largely because of the work that we've done on entities. Because the column names are nicer, the data's cleaner, you don't have to go through that huge transformation exercise in Power Query anymore. And also then we've introduced the option now that you can support for web authoring. So we no longer require a data management gateway or access to the on-premise data. So end users can author directly online, connecting to the cloud data services. The BI side, there's a long list of new things in Power BI. I'm not going to try and go through those. I suppose the big impact to us is we're leveraging the new PowerBI.com service. So this isn't in Power BI for Office 365, which is going away at the end of the year. We data management gateway anymore because AX7 is a cloud service, so we connect directly into the OData feeds. And then last, we're leveraging now the dashboards and the mobile apps. That's really the key changes for us there in the Power BI side. What's still to come? So these dates are obviously subject to change, but to give you guys a little bit of an idea of where we're going with this, right now in the previews that are currently available, so we have CTP 7 out at the moment, you can author Power BI content using AX7 data. You can also see in CTP 8, I believe it's going to be officially coming out, you'll have the controls to do the pinning back into the workspaces. So that's our current preview. We've still got on our roadmap to then release at GA at the beginning of next year the Power BI content packs that I was talking about on the PowerBI.com service. We're going to be looking at pinning the Power BI visuals back into AX7 through the embedding control. We've recently made some changes to our authentication work so that you don't have to do a second sign-in to Power BI like it was in the early part of the preview, so it does single sign-on. And then the last bit, and this is the work that we're still working on at the moment, is that drill back from Power BI back into the AX forms. It's going to come for us further down the track, still planned for next year, but it's going to come through as an update, not as GA, is we want to start leveraging LCS solutions to manage and ship our Power BI content. This is mainly just around making the deployment process a little bit easier. Right now, individual users need to log in and deploy content. We want to make that as streamlined as possible. This is really then this enterprise-ready corporate models, Power BI visualizations. They're very closely aligned together. So at the moment, the work and so the scenarios you see within Power BI and AX7, they're very much self-service scenarios. So people have their own dashboard, they can pin it into their workspace and make look the way they want. Doing with this sort of corporate model is it will be a real-time direct query access. So it won't be doing refreshing through OData. So we can again work with an even larger data set than we can now. But what it'll mean is that we'll be able to predefine more of a corporate set of reports. So it's not the end user making decisions about what they're pinning in. That'll still be there, but it'll give us the ability to be a little more structured around it. And when you set up a user, for example, say what Power BI dashboards they should get, and we deploy it all in one go. Workspaces. This is the workspaces that a moment ago within the AX7 client. We want to then start looking at these analytical workspaces, which are not really a process space, like an accounts payable clerk doing something. more at a CFO level or a retail channel manager who's doing a higher level observation. And that's effectively embedding a whole Power BI dashboard directly into the AX7 client. So again, that end user experience means they're not even going between AX and PowerBI.com anymore. To them, it just becomes one product effectively. There's a little one, but then this is introducing Power BI visualizations right into the forms themselves. So right now we do into the workspace. We want to extend it into the forms so that basically they can be pinned anywhere. I suppose this is a summary of all the focus of where we're putting AX at the moment with Power BI. It is really about making that access to that data and the building content as easily as humanly possible. To give you guys a little bit of an overview, I'm not going to go into too much detail here about Power BI, but I just wanted to show you sort of where we sit and where we show up. So you'll notice down in the bottom left-hand corner there, on the second one in, under Microsoft Cloud, we're actually identified, called now as Dynamics, as our cloud data source. So initially, we're going to be working with OData as our refresh mechanism to move data into the Power BI service. And as I said, when we move to the corporate model, it'll actually start going direct query. So we'll see real-time data directly within Power BI, and it'll be going from the Dynamics cloud service directly into PowerBI.com. From the analyst side, you've still got tools like Excel, and now we've got Power BI Desktop introduced as well, so you don't have to use Excel if you don't want to. And from an access perspective, it's HTML5, browser-based. There's no specific apps you need for it, but then you can also then get mobile apps if you want to start working with it offline, and it can do periodic refreshes, and there's some especially nice functionality coming out in the mobile tools as well. Mentioning this isn't an AX7 point, this is more directed at 2012, but hand corner you'll notice that we've got on-premise data sources there, SQL analysis services and other data sources. At the moment, that SQL Server analysis services is focused around tabular models and not multidimensional like we ship with AX. Power BI has got an upcoming change in that area. There's some functionality that's in preview at the moment. So soon they'll be supporting multidimensional. So for those of you that are in the AX2012 world, very much keep an eye out on this, because it's going to be an exciting area for us in 2012 soon, where we can start leveraging your AX2012 cubes and presenting that within PowerBI.com in the new dashboard visualizations, and start leveraging the web browser and the mobile apps. It'll be a better experience than what it is at the moment using like data management gateways and things like that. And like I said, it should be coming out in the next couple of months. Very quick slide here on authoring before we move into anything else. To give you an idea, we are using Power BI and Excel first at the moment for authoring. And what happens there is basically we go through that process of tables and aggregate measurements that Melinda was talking about before. And then OData V4, we actually take a copy of that information. It comes through Power Query and does its transformation, and then it gets stored in the Power Pivot data model. So it actually keeps a periodic set of that data. So it depends on your refresh rate, but that may be in 1 day, an hour. Before our plan and what's coming on our roadmap is that we'll be moving to real-time Power BI visualizations. Authored that either through PowerBI.com, Power BI app, or Excel. It gets published up into PowerBI.com. And that's where you can build your dashboards. You can start using Q&A, which is the natural language search. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is the AX security is applied here at the OData V4 point. So as the data is extracted out, I did notice we got a Q&A question about security coming across from Power BI. So your AX security is applied as that data comes across into the Power Pivot data model. The one thing to keep in mind, though, and this applies to 2012 and to AX7, the security is only applied when it does that refresh. So if you then go and share that dashboard or send that Excel file to anyone else, AX security is no longer applied. So this is something that, again, we're looking at how we improve it moving towards our corporate models. But it is something to keep in mind that if I build a dashboard and I share that with someone else, they are going to see the data that I've shared with them, and AX security isn't going to be able to control that. So keep that in mind. That applies to 2012 and AX7. Quick overview of authoring. To give more information on this, we've done sessions at our recent tech conference, the one in February at Convergence. There are recorded sessions that go into a little bit of detail and actually show that entire authoring process. So if you are interested, please go have a look at one of those sessions because we go through it in a little more detail. Feedback. This alias, if you haven't seen it before, DAX-BI feedback at Microsoft.com. It comes to Melinda, myself, and a whole bunch of other guys within Microsoft. So this can be feedback on what you've seen today. It can be feedback on 2012, anything really that you'd like us to be aware of in the product. Obviously, it's not support, but definitely for feedback, interesting tidbits you'd like us to take into consideration, please send them through. I think we've got some time, so I'll hand it back to Adam.
Great, thank you, Clay. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the session, there's a Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen. So please feel free to submit any questions, and Melinda and Clay will try to answer them. Let me see if we have any that have come in. Okay, it looks like we just have one that just came in right now. In order to use current OLTP systems to integrate, do we integrate them to in-memory databases?
Hi, this is Melinda. In order to use current OL system, I'm not sure if I understood that question or the intent of the question. So let me sort of demystify the in-memory database story. Basically, in SQL Server 2016, there's some enhanced capabilities, and it's called, the fundamental idea was column store indexes. So you can define an index, which is a special kind of an index, and it's kept in the memory. And in 2016, those indexes are really meant for could be used for operational analytical scenarios. So what AX does is it leverages that capability. So an aggregate measurement creates in-memory indexes on the same OLTP database. But of course, in the cloud, we do a lot of, we divert read-only workloads into read-only secondaries and so on and so forth. But fundamentally, so that's in-memory database technology and what it does. So if you talk about current OLTP systems to integrate, our integration approach in AX7 is based on data entities, and data entities are, if you want to consume data entities outside of AX, you would be consuming them through the OData endpoint, and that's how we integrate with Power BI at this point. But if you want to take data out of AX in a bulk fashion, not for sort of interactive kind of scenarios, then the DIXF, or the Data Import-Export Framework, is the way to go. And DIXF will enable you to take data out of the OLTP database into the blob store or another database. It's going to be the approach that you would use to integrate with other OLTP systems.
All right, what are questions that come in? Just a minute or so to collect their thoughts.
We are waiting. I think one of the questions that came up was when is AX publicly available. I think if you were at Convergence, you would have probably heard that AX is going to be publicly available very soon within this current year. Clay, do you know, was a date announced at EMEA Convergence?
I do not know if we announced a date today, sorry.
Okay. But, I mean, you can look forward to a Christmas present, I'm guessing. And along with the public previews that you can access, you will also have the ability to access early documentation. And we have actually created 4 hands-on labs specifically looking at the different BI scenarios. From all the way, pretty much everything that we demoed today are coming from those hands-on labs.
Looks like we actually do have a couple of more questions that just came in. Here's one. Aside X and SQL, what else needs to be bought to have Power BI? What version of SQL is required?
So I suppose the thing that's not mentioned there is there are licensing for Power BI itself. So there's a free and a pro licensing option. The free has limits, for example, like you can't refresh more often than I think daily, and you don't have some on-premise access. In terms of AX7 and how we'll be working with AX7, there is nothing else required. If you want to use Excel, you would need it. If you don't use Excel, you can use Power BI Desktop, which is free, and PowerBI.com and Power BI Desktop will connect directly to AX7. So there's no other products that you need to buy within that mix.
Clay there. Obviously, the AX7 licensing story has not been unveiled yet, but the intent that we have is to convert every AX user into a Power BI user, and we will definitely provide lots of options within AX licensing to bundle a Power BI. We'll work very aggressively on that.
Question, have you announced any more around the license model? Already answered that.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's not a lot we can share at this point, but I do know that it's going to be announced soon.
Okay. Question, will we be able to combine AX7 and Dynamics CRM into a combined Power BI dashboard?
Yes, you will. And you can do that now even with 2012. So Power BI and Power Query, it's actually really great for what we refer to as data mashup scenarios. So you can bring in multiple data sources, not only even into a single dashboard, but you could have them combined on one report, on even a chart if you had relatable data. But our dashboards that we'll release, sort of our content packs, obviously will be all AX focused initially. That's not to say that we won't do some combined ones in the future. But then you could go through, for example, and then CRM have their own content packs. You could go through and combine that into a single dashboard very easily.
Here's another question. Any news on how the Management Reporter Report Designer will be integrated into the AX7 report authoring experience?
So the Management Reporter, just to clarify, is really meant for a power user who's authoring financial statements. So the Management Reporter Report Designer is inside AX7. It's incorporated into AX7. Now, we have other reporting tools. For an example, SSRS is still the tool of choice if you want document-style reports, like creating invoices, purchase orders, things like that. And those experiences are pretty much developer-centric. Although in SSRS, there's some enhancements that will make it easy to actually change templates and things like that. But so from a report authoring point of view, there are different people doing it. So in that sense, we're not going to combine like a report authoring for Management Reporter with report authoring for SSRS. We don't think it just makes a lot of sense. But yes, Management Reporter report authoring is incorporated into AX7.
Question, for AX7 transactional reporting, like your standard transaction reports in AX2012, are there any changes there? Trying to see where your typical commodity reports stop and BI picks up.
Right. I think it's the way we look at that is be very, very focused on recommending different options for different styles of reports. And what I meant by that is, for an example, there were a lot of reports that were generated on ledger data, and we used SSRS as the engine for that in AX2012. But you find a lot of those reports coming off of Management Reporter now. Now, there were lots of reports like simple listings that are there in AX2012, which basically, the list pages or the grids that are in AX7, you will basically, you'll be able to use the grids instead of those reports. So what we've done is we've really taken a hard look at the SSRS report portfolio, and we've tried to. We haven't deleted those reports; they're still there if you want to use them. But you'll see us prescribing reporting tools for very specific scenarios. And if there are data exploration needs, Power BI is our tool of choice there. So you instead of sort of when you talk about commodity reports, I think the position that we've taken is to understand the scenario, why you need that report, what are the consequences, like what are you going to do with that report? Are you going to print it and stick it on a box, or is that going to be? So we really paid attention to that, and we'd like to prescribe options based on what you're doing with those. The approach that we've taken. On the SSRS front, you'll find quite a few interesting enhancements there. In fact, and we didn't talk about it today, but you'll find new report formats coming in. So the reports that are coming out of SSRS, some of the key document reports are, they're beautiful. They look really nice, and it's really easy to change them. You don't necessarily have to be a developer to change the invoice. So there's things like that coming too. So that's some of the improvements that we've done to reporting.
To add there, Melinda, as well as a lot of the stuff Melinda talked about earlier, like aggregate data and aggregate measurements, we can now leverage those in SSRS reports. So, they've got an option now to be working with aggregate data as well as leveraging the secondary read-only database to improve the whole BI stack that SSRS is benefiting from as well.
Here's another question. Will Power BI be deployable on customers' premises?
I know this is on the roadmap. Timing around it. So everything at the moment is still cloud focused. There are the tools that are currently available in on-premise SharePoint where you can build Power View reports, embed that into SharePoint, and that's how our current sort of Power View works within AX2012 and the role centers. In terms of the new PowerBI.com service, the one online, like I said, I know it's been discussed about that having an on-premise option, but that's down the track at the moment.
So just to add to Clay, I think one tool that you will see being talked about is Power BI Desktop. So think of Power BI Desktop as a desktop tool, not connected to the PowerBI.com service, with which you can do the data exploration. It's obviously not. You wouldn't find all the capabilities in the service in the Power BI Desktop tool, but until an on-premise version of Power BI becomes available, Power BI Desktop might be an option.
Okay, looks like we've got another question. Would it be possible to pin a management report to first an AX dashboard and then to a Power BI dashboard?
I'm not from the management reporter team, but I'll attempt to answer that one. The second one, can you pin a management reporter report to a Power BI dashboard? I don't believe we can do that at the moment. The first one, I think you can, can you put a management reporter visual on a dashboard? I think that's on their roadmap. Clay, do you know if it's possible now?
It's not now, and I don't know where it sits on their plan. Right. Unfortunately, we're neither of the right people to ask that one.
Yes, I apologize.
All right, looks like we don't have any more questions coming in, so why don't we end there? Linda and Clay, I'd like to thank you very much for presenting for us today. It was great to have you, and I want to thank all the attendees as well for joining. I'm not sure if I mentioned this at the beginning of the session, but the session was recorded, and we will post it online probably within the next few days, and we'll notify all of you when that's happened. So thanks again.
Yep. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.